Homeostasis by Rennie-Cook. Homeostasis is the tendency of a living organism to regulate its internal conditions, usually by a system of feedback controls, resulting in the stabilization of health and functioning, regardless of the continuously changing outside conditions and having to adapt to internal changes. Differing environmental pressures create a challenge to maintain cellular processes in optimum conditions. It is an essential feature of all complex animals. It is maintained by the internal organ system. This diagram explains homeostasis. My chosen animal is the koala. Koalas are nocturnal, arboreal, and herbivores. They live simply in eucalyptus forest and only eat the eucalyptus leaves from the trees. Koalas spend up to 20 hours of the day sleeping, and the rest of their time is spent eating. The koala has developed several adaptations to allow its survival in the Australian climate, including the ability to digest protein and water from the eucalyptus leaves, which are their only food source. Also, koalas have a specialized fur coat, which helps them to either cool down or warm up, depending on the environmental conditions. My focus during this video will be on the blood pressure regulation in koalas. Blood pressure allows the cells to receive oxygen and nutrients needed by keeping the blood flowing through all parts of the body. Blood pressure in koalas is the strength of blood pushing against the blood vessels. The force that is within the body's blood vessels is regulated by the beating of its heart. The heart rate of a koala when resting can range anywhere between 70 and 140 beats per minute. It can depend on the age of the koala. The higher the resistance in the blood vessels, the higher the blood pressure will be, and vice versa. Blood pressure is maintained by homeostasis in an organism and is extremely important to the animal, as the pumping of the blood around the body allows the koala to carry out life processes to survive and reproduce. How is blood pressure regulated? Autonomic nervous system, parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems all regulate blood pressure, increasing and decreasing the blood pressure when it starts to stray from the point of equilibrium. Blood pressure is controlled by the heart rate and the constriction and relaxation of artery walls. Koalas live in areas in Australia which have temperatures ranging between 60 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and often exceed 80. However, koalas usually become uncomfortable in temperatures over 80, and when in temperatures over this, koalas' blood pressure will drop. Heat is the main environmental condition that changes the koala's blood pressure, and for this reason, koalas have an adaptive significance which allows them to maintain homeostasis in their blood pressure. Koalas have thick hair and skin which helps insulate them against the cold, and this fur can also deflect heat. This significant fur protects koalas against extreme climates in the particular forest they live in. For example, if the temperature goes over 80 degrees Fahrenheit, the fur will work to deflect the heat, and therefore lowering the body temperature of a koala, and therefore increasing the blood pressure back to equilibrium point. Also, koalas have behavioral adaptations to cope with the changes in temperature. In higher temperatures, koalas are observed to stretch out their limbs, hug branches at the base of the tree, which allows the koala a higher amount of heat loss through evaporative cooling, saving hydrogen or water in the body, and therefore raising the blood pressure, normalizing it, and increasing survival of the koala. Koalas must maintain homeostasis with the blood pressure in their bodies, which changes regularly as a result of their climate temperature, fluctuating around 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Most animals will sweat when getting too hot as to lose excess body heat, and the sweat cools them down. However, koalas are different. They do not sweat, but instead they lick their fur, a process called evaporative cooling, and they also keep close to the tree trunks, which are cooler than the hot Australian air temperature. Koalas do not drink water. Therefore, to keep hydrated, they obtain moisture by eating the eucalyptus leaves, which are 50% water. The volatile oil in this particular leaf is extremely toxic to other creatures, giving koalas an adaptive survival advantage. Their liver effectively detoxifies the leaves. Different aspects of the koala's morphology and physiology is developed to be able to cope with the unpromising diet. Therefore, in combination of these specialized features and a slow metabolism, koalas have adapted to be able to eat eucalyptus leaves and still receive the nutrients that they need. This diagram shows blood regulation in koala bears. Baroreceptors are sensors located in the blood vessels. As soon as there is a change from the usual arterial blood pressure, the baroreceptors detect the amount of stretch that is occurring in the blood vessel walls, and then send a signal to the nervous system. If pressure goes above set point, the walls of these vessels passively expand, which increase the frequency of signals which indicate the pressure is high. In comparison, if the blood pressure suddenly drops, this decreases the frequency of signals which indicate the pressure is low. Here are the main baroreceptors. Signals from the baroreceptor are sent to a part of the brain called the vasomotor center, which is a group of sympathetic nerve cells contained within the medulla oblongata, a structure of the brainstem. The vasomotor center regulates or modulates blood pressure and cardiac function, primarily by the autonomic nervous system. There are two major parts of the autonomic nervous system. One is called the sympathetic, whilst the other is called parasympathetic. These two nervous systems work in conjunction with each other. The sympathetic nervous system provides a quick response to immediate need. Decrease in arterial pressure equals decreased baroreceptor firing. In comparison, the parasympathetic nervous system helps slow the body's reaction to allow a less urgent process to take place. The stimulation of nerves in these systems is caused by increased cardiac output when blood pressure is too high, or the opposite when blood pressure is too low, or the increased beating of the heart. When the sympathetic system is activated, this autonomic change causes vasorestriction, where arterioles constrict, causing systemic vascular resistance to increase, which leads to an increase in cardiac output and finally an increase of blood pressure. However, when parasympathetic system is activated, autonomic changes cause vasodilation, where arterioles dilate, causing systemic vascular resistance to decrease, or the widening of blood vessels, which decreases cardiac output and then leads to a decrease of blood pressure. Let's take a look at this put back into a feedback loop. The negative feedback loop in koalas requires certain parts of the animal, which are the heart, blood vessels, and the brainstem, to maintain homeostasis and blood pressure. Here is a diagram of the negative feedback loop. Let's first look at the negative feedback loop when the blood pressure becomes too high. Firstly, the stimulus shows when the koala's blood pressure exceeds the normal set point. The receptors, which include the heart, the aorta, and the internal carotid, all have baroreceptors which detect changes in the blood pressure. The baroreceptors detect the stretching of the arterial walls. When the wall is stretched, this increases signals which indicate that the blood pressure is too high. Then the process, the vasomotor center, receives the information from the baroreceptor that the blood pressure is too high, which in response activates the parasympathetic system. Therefore, the effect of this is that the autonomic changes cause vasodilation, causing vascular resistance to decrease, which then decreases cardiac output. The heart rate slows down and the blood vessels relax to let more blood through, which lowers the blood pressure, therefore it becomes normalized. Now let's take a look at the negative feedback loop when a disruption occurs in the koala's blood pressure due to the increase in temperature. When the temperature gets too high, the koala's blood pressure decreases. Firstly, stimulus detects when the blood pressure is decreasing. When the blood pressure starts to drop, the baroreceptors detect the decreasing frequency of the signal that indicates the blood pressure is low. The vasomotor center then receives these signals and the sympathetic system is activated. The effector is where the autonomic changes cause vasoconstriction, causing vascular resistance to increase, and these changes increase cardiac output, bringing the blood pressure back up. Without this homeostatic system to maintain blood pressure, the koalas risk having heart attacks, strokes, and kidney failure due to the blood pressure falling from the increase in temperature. Koalas must often migrate if temperatures become too extreme. They aren't very good at moving around on the ground, and therefore use their arboreal traits to move around treetops. When moving on ground, koalas are in danger of being attacked by dogs and other such animals. This is why koalas have adaptive significance to be able to live in the habitat they are and feed off eucalyptus leaves. Without their specialized fur, they would